So, Matt, the question I have about all this when I look at these stories is we know that we're under constant cyber attack, whether it's China or Iran. We, read these stories.
Or individual actors.
Or individual actors, right. To me, the question isn't that we're on a hair trigger. Quite the opposite. At what point will we respond as, a country that is under attack?
Well, my question as an ill-informed skeptic, right? So someone who doesn't know a lot about cyber warfare, but is generally skeptical about government claims, is how much does the phrase cyber warfare immediately send the conversation off the kilter of reality? I mean, Wired magazine had a style guide change, I think 12 years ago, to get rid of cyber because it was already a pretty ridiculous sounding word. If you live in the District of Columbia, you hear nonstop advertisements like, "We've got the career for you. Come to the National Security Agency's, Department of Cyber War Prevention and everything." I smell government contracting with this.
Well, the Chinese share your concern because they've taken cyber warfare out. They don't call it that. They call it information warfare. And I think, Jeffrey, you were talking about this or hinting at it just a moment ago. China, or at least players inside of China, have launched several attacks. And I guess we should also do this. We should differentiate between spying and information gathering and attacks, which, again, I don't know that I can easily do. But we do know this. In 2010, China did attack Google. Is that wrong?
Well, we suspect that China was responsible for that attack, yes. And you make a good point, or someone there, I don't know you all.
There's a lot of
made a good point
shadowy figures.
About there being a difference between cyber war or acts of cyber warfare and cyber espionage, two different things. We really only have a few examples of true cyber warfare, such as the Russia-Georgia war in 2008, or Operation Cast Lead, which involved Israel and Hamas in 2009. This is where you had a kinetic war, and at the same time, simultaneously, cyber attacks were going on.
Jeff, would it be fair then to think of this more like terrorism with non-state actors in terms of with the potential threats and how we need to respond to it? And there could be non-state actors that come out of sovereign countries that we need to respond to in a sort of a delicate way. Would that be a better way of thinking about this than thinking about China attacking the United States?
No, it wouldn't be cyber terror because, again, we haven't really seen any examples. It's not to say that it might not happen. I'm fairly certain it will happen in the future, that Al-Qaeda will recruit software engineers that have the capability of using the internet to cause mass disruption and harm. I'm positive that will occur at some point in the future. It just hasn't happened yet. So cyber terror is still off the table. But Jeffrey, what we're seeing today is cyber espionage, and that's the primary attacks that we see.
So, Jeffrey, the question I have is, how is the United States government responding? Are we putting diplomatic pressure? Are we, how are we looking at this? Are we just saying, this is sort of like low-grade activity that we have to tolerate, and it's what nations are doing to one another, and it doesn't rise to the level of a governmental response?
It's actually a very complicated, very frustrating exercise. So the U.S. is really, the U.S. government is very tense around this issue because U.S. intellectual property is stolen on a scale never before seen. We don't really know who all the players are, but we certainly know China is one of them. So China, on the other hand, insists that it's not attacking, and it has laws against this type of cyber crime, that it prosecutes cyber criminals when it finds them. So it's left to diplomats, I guess, to try to sort this out.
What's interesting, you can't overlook the fact that Harold Koh is the one that gave this speech. Now, Harold Koh is someone who's been accused on multiple occasions of attempting to or being interested in bringing international law's influence into the U.S. legal justice system. Now, these kind of treaties establishing the rules of engagement in cyber warfare are actually something that China and Russia have supported, where the United States has opposed these kind of treaties. So I don't know, but I think it's worth considering, is that an angle here that we need to consider as well? Is this an attempt to bring kind of international standards into our country
that Russia and China will abide by?
Right.
Yeah, I think that would be probably an important pushback in that moment where it's unlikely other people would abide by such a rule. I do think, to put another thing on the table, though, is we have a different situation here where cyber attacks into the United States, to the degree that we're using the word cyber, are not just going to target government institutions, but also private institutions. Private institutions who may need to just be defending themselves. Their PayPal has decided that they're not going to be able to depend on the U.S. government to stop fraud, both internationally and domestically, and so they developed their own sort of defenses and ways of processing this, both protecting themselves and from stopping fraud. And this conversation can't just be what is the role of the U.S. government in protecting us from a Chinese attack. This is also a moment where private institutions need to recognize that as we move forward in technology, that they also need to be putting themselves and their resources.
Certainly, but I mean, even if a spectacular example, obviously, of a terrorist attack of 9/11, those were on private buildings, right? However, there needed to be a robust U.S. government response.
The slight difference in this situation being the difference between flying planes in and
certainly, which I concede that. However, attacking the United States private property can trigger a robust government response.
Well, think of, in general, what makes the internet great. It's the distributed nature of a vast network. There isn't one single part that you can poke and break the internet. It's everywhere. And we should think of that in terms of protecting it or protecting the threats across it. It isn't going to be, I believe, again, as an ill-informed skeptic, it isn't going to be a single source saying, I have found the shield. This is the mother of all McAfees, and it's going to prevent us from bad things happening. No, it's not going to work like that. I don't think. It's going to be a bunch of different people finding ways to make the distribution, the network, more flexible and less rigid.